name is Oscar, and today I will be speaking briefly about the impact of culture on emergency management planning and response. This is a very important topic because disasters affect more than just buildings or infrastructure. They affect the people and communities as well. And how people experience and respond in these actual crisis situations is based largely in part on their culture. In the setting of emergency management, culture is described as the shared norms, values, beliefs, and practices of a given community. Schneider, 2011, our book, states that disasters always occur in a social context, and that social context will influence the level of preparedness that each community has and the ways that people respond when an event does occur. We can unpack this a little bit further down into three ways in which the culture can influence a community's emergency management. That first way being risk perception, the ways that communities actually perceive the risk and how that differs. For example, a community may see disasters as a natural act and a risk that can be mitigated if given proper warning and preparation. But Schneider reminds us that public safety managers cannot take the isolated individual or community under threat for granted, considering that each is interpreting and understanding this risk or disaster in their own way. Cultural perspectives take on the role of whether or not these individuals are responding, preparing, or adopting to this externally obtained knowledge on the situation. The second way is communication and trust. And culture has a large impact on how people communicate and to whom they respond to. During these disasters, emergency managers expect significant public cooperation and compliance. However, if cultural groups do not trust government agencies, or they only take their truth from informal leaders such as church leaders, tribal chiefs, or community organizers, then the emergency manager's warning is not going to penetrate that community deeply enough and well enough unless these people actually hear it from one of their own trusted figureheads. In the book, Schneider can give us some scenarios where the communication does break down due to these cultural misinterpretations and the delayed effective response that comes and jeopardizes lives due to this. Our third way can be community resource and resilience. Culture can really impact how these communities organize for disaster recovery. Some communities today have a narration of a strong history of collective action, mutual aid, and informal helping of others. While on the other hand, some communities have narratives that promote strong individualism that can put existing marginalized communities such as elderly and immigrants that don't have additional social supports in place at risk. Schneider does point out that when officials recognize and acknowledge culture in this way and the vulnerabilities that exist, emergency managers can create an emergency response plan that plays out beyond the paper experience. Why is this all important and relevant to us as potential practitioners and citizens? The effectiveness of this emergency management is not really on the plan, but on the people themselves. If emergency managers do not consider the culture, no matter how great the plan looks on paper, it will fail. If emergency managers allocate some degree of their time to culture and how these communities will respond and provide communication, they will be able to create a response that communities will actually use and thus save more lives. In summary, we should not overlook culture as a side note in these disaster scenarios because it is at the center of planning and response. Schneider reminds us that disaster management is as much about sociology and psychology as about policy and procedures. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope I have thoroughly explained to you all how culture impacts the ways communities respond to and prepare for disasters, as well as the role culture plays in the successful execution of these emergency plans. Really look forward to hearing back from you guys in the feedback and the discussion board. You guys have a great afternoon.